I know right before we started, you said you want to talk about America, its relations to its allies, the tariffs, the Trump stuff, but is there anything, I mean, we can even start there. Do you think there's been any net positive to the tariffs?
What's actually happening in this clip is very different from the way it's being framed by partisan audiences. Andrew Schulz isn't forcing a CNN journalist into a MAGA corner. He's doing what long-form conversations are supposed to do. Stress test ideas in real time. Fareed Zakaria, a veteran foreign policy analyst and host on CNN, comes into the discussion with a skeptical view of tariffs because, according to most mainstream economic reporting, broad tariffs tend to raise consumer prices and strain alliances. That position isn't driven by personal dislike of Donald Trump. It reflects a consensus shared by many economists across administrations, including Republican ones. Framing that skepticism as corporate media bias skips over the substance of the argument and replaces it with grievance. What is useful about this exchange is that it exposes a deeper tension in how Americans consume political information. Podcasts like Flagrant allow for back-and-forth questioning that cable news rarely has time for, and that format can surface genuine disagreements without soundbite editing. Zakaria's willingness to engage outside his usual media lane matters, not because he's being grilled, but because democratic discourse benefits when ideas are challenged openly, rather than dismissed as propaganda. The real issue driving declining trust in media isn't that journalists are anti-Trump. It's that complex policy debates like trade, tariffs, and global alliances are often flattened into partisan scorekeeping. This clip shows how easily that framing takes over, and how necessary it is to push past it if voters are going to understand what's actually at stake.
Honestly, no. I know you're supposed to say on the one hand, on the other hand.
You say whatever you want.
I'll tell you, to me, the tragedy of this is like one of the superpowers of America, the real superpowers, is that we have this group of countries that are our allies, that are friendly with us, that trade with us, that we've built this ecosystem. And so you can't just look at what we can do. What you have to really ask yourself, what can we do along with Europe, along with Japan, along with Australia, because they're all on board. They're all part of the American ecosystem.
Yep.
And if you look at the tariffs, the way Trump is doing them, they actually get slammed the most because they're being punished for trading with us closely. Because the ones that we have a lot of trade with are the ones that end up getting the worst tariffs. I mean, crazily, the one country exempt from all the tariffs is Russia. But even if Trump had thrown Russia in, the truth is we don't do that much business with Russia.
Maybe
so
that's
it
why,
wouldn't make a big difference. But it's the Canadians who've linked their economy to ours for the last 30, 40 years that are getting slammed. It's the Mexicans who've reformed their economy to essentially make it almost like an integral part of the American supply chain. Like we don't make cars in America anymore. We make cars in North America.
Right.
We go, and the parts go back and forth 16 times, which is why the tariff rates are sometimes really high, because every time one part crosses a border,
you got to pay that tariff.
And it's the Europeans. So to me, that's the tragedy. It's like we don't realize that's the unique thing about America. Like, you know how many military alliances China has? Russia and North Korea. You know how many we have? 59.
Yeah.
Right. That's what makes us special.
So help us understand this. Just like the average American, like myself, doesn't really know much about this. I keep hearing people saying, oh, these tariffs are devastating. They're bad for foreign relations. They're bad for foreign policy. Yet many of these countries that we are now imposing tariffs on tariff us. So why is it only bad for foreign relations when we are tariffing them? I think the average American looks at that and be like, well, tariffs can't be that bad for foreign relations if they're all tariffing us.
Andrew Schulz raises a critical question to Fareed Zakaria, one that cuts straight to the heart of how America's position in global politics is discussed in mainstream media. Zakaria pivots to a familiar point, talking about the number of allies the U.S. has compared to other countries. But in doing so, he seems to shift the focus away from the American perspective and toward a generalized sympathy for nations with fewer alliances. While acknowledging international relationships is important, the framing here risks overlooking the real impact on everyday Americans and the nation's strategic priorities. Schulz's challenge is precise. If we're examining foreign policy, we must first evaluate what America actually brings to the table. The larger implication is clear. Too often, corporate media narratives get lost in abstract comparisons and moral posturing, rather than assessing practical outcomes for the country. This is why questions like the one Schulz raises are so necessary. They demand clarity and accountability, forcing hosts to address how policy decisions affect U.S. interests directly, not just how they appear on a global scoreboard. Zachariah's response, while informative, underscores a recurring problem. Mainstream outlets can sometimes prioritize politeness and caution over the kind of incisive analysis that citizens rely on to understand complex issues. By pressing on these points, Schulz not only holds the conversation to a higher standard, but he also exemplifies the kind of media scrutiny that strengthens democracy, reminding audiences that critical thinking should never be optional.
Right. So first important thing to understand, again, among our allies, this is the advanced countries in the world, average tariffs before Trump came to office were 2.5%. So for everyone. So you can always find some...
Averages get tricky though, right?
Agreed. So the Europeans protect their agriculture.
And so how much do they tariff us on agrarian products?
So there are two kinds of things. One, they tariff us. It's not so much the tariffs. It's they don't import American chicken.
They refuse to take our stuff
because they believe that our chicken is washed in chlorine. They think that that's bad. You know, there are a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues on which there are a lot of issues on which Europeans basically agree with RFK Jr. Which is to say that we have too many chemicals in our food, things like that.
So they might be right about that.
Dude, I agree.
I actually think they're right about it. One of the few areas where I totally agree with RFK Jr. is on all that stuff. He points out, if you look at
on everything,
a box of cereal in Europe has like 8 ingredients. The same box of cereal has 18 ingredients. Like, what are the 10 things that we're putting in that they ban? So some of it is those kind of tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers. But the main point, because what you're saying is true, is that they tariff us. Look, everybody protects a few things, but we lived in a very low tariff world, so that these were not major distortions. And you could have your pet peeve, like you wanted to protect some agriculture, we wanted to protect something. What we've done is we've gone from 2.5%, we're at 15% now. Mm-hmm. So that's like a 6-fold increase. Mm-hmm. And what that's going to do is make everyone else raise their tariffs more. So suddenly everybody...
Why would it do that?
Because they have to retaliate, right? Well, because their feeling is if you're blocking our goods, we're going to block your goods.
The notion that other countries always have to retaliate against U.S. trade actions is often overstated, and Andrew Schulz highlights that misconception clearly. While the second term of Trump raised many questions about hidden agendas and unpredictable policy moves, not every action followed the narrative mainstream outlets presented. There were instances, like tariffs on Canada or other allies, where motivations seemed tangled with broader geopolitical messaging rather than purely economic reasoning. This raises a fundamental question. Are these policies truly in the interest of Americans? Or are they driven by external considerations and political theater? Zachariah's commentary indirectly acknowledges this complexity, though mainstream media often omits these nuances, leaving viewers with a one-dimensional story. Take, for instance, Trump's tariffs on China during his first term. Many corporate outlets amplified fears of an imminent trade, war, or even military conflict, creating a climate of panic. But the reality was more measured. Geopolitical analysts later confirmed that China recognized the U.S. position and responded with a level of strategic respect. The overblown media framing failed to communicate this balance, reinforcing a cycle where fear and outrage dominate coverage instead of informed analysis. Schulz's questioning underscores a crucial point for viewers. Not all alarmist reporting reflects the full picture. By challenging assumptions about retaliation and strategy, he exposes the gap between media narratives and actual geopolitical dynamics, encouraging audiences to think critically about the policies affecting their daily lives and the global balance of power.
But if we say, no, you don't do that, you have access to our market, and our market is bigger, and therefore we have some leverage.
Right, and so that is essentially
like
what Trump is doing.
Costco buys a bunch of stuff, they get a much lower price. So when we buy a bunch of stuff, we get a much lower price.
Now remember, the European Union, which on trade acts as one, have about as much power as we do in that sense.
But we're
their market is about as
European
big.
Union every day.
No, the trade stuff, they're pretty unified. So
yeah, but we got England out of there, so we're going to bring it down so we can advantage.
I don't think Everyone's doing great on the television.
No, I tease, but yeah.
So you're right. The two kind of players that can
Exert
go
that
mano a
influence
mano
and force
are the Chinese and the European Union, because they've got enough. They've got a bunch of leverage. But we'll always have a slightly higher. So you're right. They won't raise them to the level we do, but they'll raise them a certain amount. And all my point is, who suffers? The consumer, right? The American who goes to Walmart and now his food is more expensive, his clothes are more expensive. And by the way, that you don't give a shit whether this shirt costs you 20% more. But
I don't, but there are people who really do.
But a person who lives on $35,000 a year.
1,000%.
So walk me through this, because I'm not an economist, but the theory to me that I understand.
Looks great today.
Oh, thank you, dude. I appreciate that. I put on my wife's products.
I was complimenting him so much that I forgot how handsome you were.
Dude, thank you. I appreciate that. I was feeling left out.
I would go along with that.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, right?
I fully disagree.
Tan, like the tan. So anyway, as you play out this America First thing, I understood the idea. We go to Middle America a lot for these shows, and I see there used to be manufacturing there, and there's not. And I actually empathize with what they thought Make America Great meant. A lot of them. I'm sure there were racist people, but I think a lot of them were like, yo, we used to have manufacturing.
One of the most striking moments in this conversation is the emphasis on the practical realities of American workers versus the moral posturing often highlighted in mainstream commentary. The discussion touches on Middle America, where manufacturing jobs have declined over the decades, and questions arise about how much personal character or ideology should factor into economic opportunities. The key point is clear. If people are willing and able to work, especially in sectors critical to the economy, their private beliefs or biases shouldn't become the primary focus of national debate. This perspective challenges the tendency of some media narratives to over-prioritize moral judgments at the expense of addressing tangible economic concerns that affect millions of Americans. Additionally, Zachariah raised points about global leverage, citing the European Union and China. While these are important actors on the world stage, it's crucial to recognize that their influence over U.S. policy is inherently limited. Strategic alliances, particularly NATO, create a framework where the U.S. maintains significant leverage due to financial contributions and collective security agreements. The implication is that fears about foreign retaliation or domination are often overstated in mainstream reporting. By breaking down these complex dynamics in accessible terms, the discussion reminds viewers that informed analysis should focus on concrete consequences rather than sensationalized narratives. Schulz's line of questioning encourages a reality-based assessment of both domestic and international issues, illustrating the value of probing, thoughtful commentary, and fostering a more accountable media environment.